I am making a predaplant deck profile for post Dimension Force. This deck has been one of my favorite decks ever since its introduction in Arc 5, just because Starving Venom Fusion Dragon was my favorite of the Dimensional Dragons. And once I found out Predaplants got more support after that, I just kept getting it until they're good. And with their new cards, I actually think the deck is actually pretty good. So without any further ado, starting off with the monsters, I play 3 copies of Buffalicula. This card has the pendulum effect of once per turn, you can fuse with monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. But if you use this effect, you can only fusion summon dark fusion monsters from your extra deck, which is perfectly fine because every monster in the extra deck is a dark fusion monster. And then it has the monster effect if it's sent to the graveyard or added to your face-up extra deck by being used as fusion material. And then you can add 1 face-up dark pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand, except for another copy of itself. You can only use that effect once per turn. So I just like it because you can fuse with the other new pendulum scale to then add it back to your hand and then be able to spread predator counters. Then I play 3 copies of Predaplant Biblisp. Biblisp has the effect if it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, then you can add a Predaplant monster from your deck to your hand, except for another copy of itself. And if a monster on the field has a predator counter, it can summon itself back from the graveyard, but then it gets banishment, lose the field. You can only use each of its effects once per turn. This is just a decent foolish burial target that lets you search for whatever Predaplant monster you still need. Then to finish the level 1 monsters, I do play 3 copies of Predaplant Cericiant. Cericiant has the effect of an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can special summon it from your hand. And then if it battles a monster, then at the end of the damage step, it destroys the other monster. And if it is sent to the graveyard, if it's destroyed by battle or sent to the graveyard by card effect, then you can search your deck for a Predator card, except for another copy of Cericiant. Then I play 3 copies of Predaplant Chlamydia Sundew. Chlamydia Sundew has the effect of while it's on the field, monsters with predator counters are treated as dark monsters. And the effect of you can activate its effect to then fuse itself with other monsters from your hand or field, or you can use your opponent's monsters as long as they have predator counters. So I like this card just because it's a walking super polymerization as long as your monsters have predator counters. And you can only use each of that effect of Predaplant Chlamydia Sundew once per turn. Then I play 3 copies of Predaplant Ophiuchus Scorpio and the 1 Darlingtonia Cobra. Ophiuchus Scorpio has the effect of when it's summoned, you can send 1 monster from your hand to the graveyard, so then special summon a Predaplant monster from your deck. And then Cobra has the effect of when it's summoned by the effect of a Predaplant monster, you can add 1 polymerization or a fusion spell from your deck to your hand. And you can only use that affected Cobra once per duel, and for your Scorpio once per turn. Then I play 3 copies of Predaplant Spinodonia. I'll probably end up cutting this card down to 2, so that I can add in a single copy of Instant Fusion. And I'll cover that why with that later when I get to the extra deck. But Spinodonia has the effect of when it's summoned, once per turn, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls and place a predator counter on it. And then at the end of the damage step, if it battled a monster that was level 4 or lower, you can special summon 1 Predaplant monster from your deck, except for another copy of Predaplant Spinodonia. Then I play 1 copy of Predaplant Drosophilum Hydra. Hydra has the effect of you contribute summon it to your field from your hand or graveyard by attributing 1 monster your opponent controls with a predator counter. And then once per turn, as a quick effect, you can banish 1 Predaplant from your hand or graveyard to then target 1 monster your opponent controls and have it lose 500 attack points. You can only use each effect of Hydra once per turn, and that effect of Hydra can be used while it's on the field or in the graveyard. Then I play 2 copies of predaplant Helium Fornicus. I'll probably cut this card down to 1 just so I can toss in Foolish Burial, because I do kind of need to play that card. But Helium Fornicus has the effect of it is a free summon from your hand while your opponent has a monster with a Predator counter, as well as having the effect that if it is destroyed by an opponent's card, then you can target 1 Dark Dragon or plant in your graveyard and special on it, except for another copy of Helium Fornicus. You can only use each of its effects once per turn. Then to finish off the monsters, I play 3 copies of Predaplant Triantis. Predaplant Triantis is a scale 8 that has the effect of when you are, or while it's in the pendulum zone, you can use cards in your pendulum scales as fusion material. So if you activate Buffalicula's effect, you can fuse it with Triantis to then return itself to your hand, and then Triantis has the effect of if it's destroyed, if it's sent to the graveyard or added to the extra deck as fusion material, you can then place Predator counters on monsters your opponent controls, up to for each monster you control. But that's it for the monsters. Moving on for the 1-up spells, I play the 1 Preda Pruning, 1 Called by the Grave, and 1 Predaplast. Predaplast has the effect of you can reveal any number of Predaplant monsters in your hand to then place an equal number of Predaplant or Predator counters on monsters your opponent controls. And then if a Predaplant would be destroyed by battle, you can then banish Predaplast from your graveyard instead. And you can only use each effective Predaplast once per turn. I would easily play more of this if its effect included being able to save from effect destruction, but since it's only battle, it's a decent 1-of. Predator Pruning is just a premature burial for Predaplants. Just target Predaplant in your graveyard and special summon it, and then if Predator Pruning is destroyed, destroy that monster. And then Called by the Grave to steal its hand traps. Then I play 1 copy of Predator Pruning, 1 copy of Ultra Polymerization, and 1 copy of Greater Polymerization. Predaponics, I realized I said the wrong name earlier, but Predaponics has the once per turn effect. You can special summon a level 4 lower Predaplant from your graveyard by negating its effects. And then you have to pay 800 life points during your standby phase to keep it in play, or else it will self-destruct. And then Ultra Polymerization, you pay 2,000 life points to then be able to fuse with monsters from your field. And I don't. Okay, you use 2 monsters you control as material, and then you can banish it from your graveyard to then summon back those monsters. But when you activate Ultra Polymerization, neither player is allowed to activate cards or effects in response to it. So when you activate the effect to fuse, your opponent can't just do something like Savage Dragon negate, but they can still negate its grave effect. And then Greater Polymerization can only be used when fusing 3 or more monsters. But it just lets you fusion summon using monsters from your hand or field material. And then if a monster summoned by its effect gains the effect of it cannot be... Can't remember if it's target or destroyed. It cannot be destroyed by card effects, as well as being unable... I am butchering this with my memory alone. It makes the fusion summoned monster cannot be destroyed by card effects, and allows it to inflict piercing battle damage. Then I play 3 copies of Polymerization since this is a fusion-based deck. 3 copies of Super Polymerization just because I've noticed that since Despia is actually a branded, anything is running everywhere now. Super Polymerization is actually great against branded decks, just because most of the better fusion monsters in this deck actually require at least 1 fusion monster as material. So being able to use your opponent's monsters as material to summon your own monsters is actually pretty good, and as well as only at the cost of discarding a card. But this can also be used with using your own monsters just to extend the damage you can do, which is actually something I've done quite a bit and actually won a couple games with. But I do need to add Foolish Burials and Biblisp to then search for any monster, because with Biblisp, Foolish Burial turns into a add a predaplant monster from deck to hand. And then Instant Fusion needs to be added for one of the monsters in the extra deck, which I do need to do a few changes to the extra deck, but I will go over what those are once I actually get to it. And then to finish off the spell cards, I do play 3 copies of Predapractice. Predapractice has the effect of you can special summon a Predaplant from your hand, and then you can search a Predaplant or a Predap card from your deck to your hand. So it can be except you can search any Predap card except for another copy of Predapractice. So you can search Predaponics, Predapruning, any Predaplant monster. However, when you use this effect, you can only fusion summon from the extra deck for, let's see, it's for the rest of the turn. So if you use this card's effect, you want to link summon and then use Predapractice. If you're going to. I don't have the link monster I would play, so that's one of the things I would add. I just don't know what I would take out for it. But that is it for the main deck. Like I said, I just need to take out 2 cards, probably Helium Fornicus and a Spinodonia, for Instant Fusion and Foolish Burial. I haven't exactly worked out the details of this deck as to ratios to also add hand traps like Ash Blossom and Infinite Permanence. But starting off with the monsters, I play 3 copies of Predaplant Ambula Melodus. I am very surprised that this card was a common in Dimension Force. But it just requires 2 Predaplant monsters, so it's extremely easy to make. And then it has the effect of, if this card is fusion summoned, you can add 1 Predaplant monster or 1 Predap spell or trap from your deck, graveyard, or face-up extra deck to your hand. And then it has the effect of, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls with a Predator counter, or 1 monster you control, tribute it, and if you do, special summon a Predaplant monster from your deck. So not only is it a searcher when summoned, but it can also tribute an opponent's monster to then emergency teleport a Predaplant from your deck. So because of that, I am very surprised that Ambula Melodus is not something like Ultra or Secret Rare. Then for another easily made Predaplant, I play 3 copies of Predaplant Chimeraphlasia, with just acquiring a Predaplant monster and a Dark monster. But it has the effect of, once per turn, it can target 1 monster your opponent controls with an equal or lower level. Its original level is 7. To then banish that monster. And then, if it battles an opponent's monster, you can have that monster lose 1,000 attack to then have this card gain 1,000 attack. So it can easily attack something that's 4,000 attack, and then change that monster to 3,000, and then its own attack will rise to 3,500. But the best part of this card is the grave effect, where during the next standby phase after it was sent to the graveyard, you can then search your deck for any fusion or polymerization spell. So this card can even let you search for things like super polymerization, which I think is really broken for this sort of card. Then I play 1 copy of Starving Venomy Dragon and 1 copy of Predaplant Dracostapelia. Starving Venomy Dragon just requires a Dark monster and a Pendulum monster, but it has the effect of, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. This card will then copy that monster's name, its effects, and then it will negate that monster's effects, weaken it by 500, and then burn your opponent for 500. And then if it's destroyed, you can place it in your Pendulum Scale, and its Pendulum effect makes it so that every time a card is sent to the graveyard, or a card or cards is sent to the graveyard, it gains 1 Venomy counter for each card sent. And then just makes it so that all Dark Dragon monsters, or that all monsters except Dark Dragons, lose 200 attack points for each counter it has. I like it mostly for its effect to be able to steal monster effects and then burn for 500. And then Draco Stapelia has the effect of once per turn as a quick effect, it can target one monster your opponent controls and give it a predator counter. And then has the continuous effect of being able to negate the activated effects of opponent's monsters that have predator counters. Then I play 3 copies of Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. This card is still one of my favorite fusion monsters ever since it was first released, or even when it first showed up in the Arc 5 show. But this card has the effect of when it's fusion summoned, it can gain the attack points of one special summon monster on the or one other special summon monster on the field until the end of the turn. It can target one level 5 or higher monster your opponent controls to then change its name to that monster's name and then gain its effects until the end of the turn. And then if this card fusion summon card is destroyed, then it will dark hole all special summon monsters on the field. So I just like it because not only is it like a powerhouse, it also takes other things with it when it gets destroyed. Then I play 2 copies of Predaplant Triphioridum. Triphioridum has the effect of it gains the attack of all other monsters on the field with predator counters. And then while it's fusion summoned, it can negate the special summon of opponent's monster from the extra deck and then destroy it. But only gets that effect if it's fusion summoned. And then while it's in the graveyard, if your opponent has a monster with a predator counter, it can summon itself back from the graveyard in defense position. The only downside of those 2 effects is you can only use each effect once per turn. But it's still a decent 3000 attack body and super poly target if your opponent's playing a dark deck, as its only fusion requirement is 3 dark monsters on the field. Just like Starting Venom's like decent super poly target, just requiring 2 dark monsters on the field. And then to finish off the fusion monsters, I play 1 copy of Greedy Venom Fusion Dragon and 1 Starving Venom Predapower Fusion Dragon. Greedy Venom is definitely one of my favorite fusion monsters, just by the fact that it just requires a Predaplant monster and then dark monster's original level is 8 or higher. But I really like this card just because once per turn it can target one monster your opponent controls, negate its effects, and then reduce its attack to 0. And then if it is destroyed, it will dark hole the field, and then you can banish a level 8 or higher monster from your graveyard to summon it back to your field, and you can only use each of its effects once per turn. But I just love this card because this card has been able to get around so many Crystal Link Synchro Dragons as long as they weren't summoned using Wind Witches. And then Starving Venom Predapower Fusion Dragon just requires a Dark Fusion monster and a Fusion monster. So this card is very good to use against Despia decks, being able to just use 2 of your opponent's Fusion monsters as long as one is a Dark monster. And then it just has the effect of it's always treated as a Predaplant card, and that it has the effect of once per turn, when a card or effect is activated, you contribute 1 monster on the field that has a predator counter to negate that effect, and if you do, destroy it. And then if this card is destroyed, then you can also add, you can target 1 dark monster in your graveyard to then special summon it. I want to play 2 of this card, but I only have the 1, so for now, 1's enough. But the changes I would make to this deck is I would take out probably 1 copy of Chimera Phlasia and either a Triphioridum or Ambulomelodus to then add 1 of the Sylvan Link just to be able to special summon more monsters. Or to even add something like Guardian Chimera to use with greater polymerization. Just to use 2 monsters from your field, 1 from hand, to then summon it where it can't be destroyed by card effects. It inflicts piercing damage, and then gets to destroy 2 cards, and you get to draw 1. But that is it for my Predaplant deck profile. If you have any ideas of what I can do to improve the deck, any ideas of decks you'd like to see me make, or decks I'd like to see face each other, feel free to comment those below. Thanks for watching.